go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ASCII Anything, brought to you by Moser Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Moser's Director of Personnel. We're glad that you're with us for this episode of ASCII Anything, because today we're going to be talking about controlling the Overton window. And with us to talk about this topic are two of Moser Consulting's own, Marcus Reed and Jim McKean, are rejoining us. The Overton window is a concept that describes a range of ideas or policies that are considered socially acceptable or politically possible at any given moment. Named after Joseph Overton, a policy analyst, the idea suggests that public perception sets the boundaries of what's feasible, meaning that for any idea to gain traction, it first has to fall within this window of acceptability. What's powerful about the Overton window is that it's not fixed. It can shift over time, sometimes gradually, sometimes rapidly, thanks to public discourse, cultural shifts, or deliberate advocacy. But to learn a little bit more about this and much more, let's welcome our guests, Marcus Reed and Jim McKean. Gentlemen, welcome back to Ask Anything. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Hi, Angel. Glad to be back.
Hey, it's always fun to have you guys back. You guys bring in a ton of knowledge, and I really enjoy having our conversations. Last podcast was very entertaining for me. So I am not as knowledgeable, if you will, on this topic. So I'm really looking forward to asking these questions and hearing from you guys. So I'm really interested in this. So let's start with the Overton window. Often gets mentioned in political discourse, as I mentioned, but where does the concept actually originate and what are its core principles?
It does originate in politics. It came from, as you noted, I think it was Joseph Overton at a think tank in Michigan. But Jim and I often think about it's very useful in IT when you are trying to modernize methodologies, processes, etc. It's very common that clients want new tools to solve a problem that really is a people problem or a culture problem. And that's where the Overton window, even though it was originally applied to politics, comes in extremely useful in information technology and lots of other contexts as well, of course. Because basically you've heard of the boiling water and the frog, right? The water gets hotter and hotter until the frog is boiled. Turns out in real life, that's not how frogs act. They actually jump out when it gets too hot. And so when we bring in these new technologies, new tools, new processes, it's really important we use the Overton window as a way to talk about the other important part of IT improvement, modernization, etc.
Some of the most important concepts buried within a culture are sometimes almost invisible to the people who are kind of inside the culture. And the Overton window kind of helps express that a little bit. So if you're thinking about a project which kind of requires, for instance, a management team to sort of change behavior that's been very successful for them up to this point, you may run into some resistance until you begin to help them see a way of shifting their thinking so that they can kind of accept this new and improved role for themselves in the organization. That's the sort of thing Marcus is talking about.
Yeah. And just to add on what you said, Jim, this concept is from the 90s. It's extremely recent. The workplace has changed. We've gone from a manufacturing economy in general to a services economy in general, with IT being sort of the top of that pyramid. And so the ways of working have to change. It's more human-centric, it's more creative. So it's not just changing a thing on the assembly line and retraining the person who works that station.
Right.
There's a lot more to advancement and modernization in a creative, high-tech workplace.
Let's talk a little bit about where have you seen the Overton window concept applied beyond its origins in politics to now, as you were mentioning, in tech, maybe tech innovation or IT in general?
We've certainly seen it in the sort of technology projects that we run into. The important thing about using this in a sort of a change management model is you want to make these assumptions about what's acceptable first visible. You have to make them so that people can see what it is that they're talking about. Often there is more than one theme running through an organization that needs to be changed. And if you think about the Overton window not as one window that captures absolutely every concept that's in there, instead, each concept has sort of an extreme on each end, right? So if you think about a company, I'll throw out some absolutely mythical examples. All right. So if you think of a company that people think of it as being a family-oriented company that has always said that basically you're looking at lifetime employment here. If, as long as you don't like break a law or do something really, really bad, you can depend on there always being one here. So that's kind of like one extreme sort of end. And then on the other extreme end, you've got a company that's very transactional, that is, brings people on, lets them go, all for the benefit of the company without kind of thinking about the impact on the people impact that they're having on those. Those are sort of like two windows. If you go into any organization, they have some place between those two an idea about how to treat the people who are working for them, right? And that's like one dimension that you have to kind of think about when you're thinking about a change project.
The best example that I can think of is agile transformation, right? You've got an IT organization that is used to working in waterfall or whatever pre-agile way, right? You want to make, I've seen attempts at this. I've been a part of back when I was a developer, there was a waterfall organization. Everybody got told that we were going to spend 2 days in agile training, and they spent a ton of money. Imagine everybody in the whole organization, 2 days. At the end of that 2 days, we were told to now, like, congratulations, you are agile. Now go do things in agile ways. And basically leadership tried to yank the Overton window up or down.
Yeah.
They're not in charge of the Overton window. It's the culture, it's the group, it's the individuals and departments. That led to a lot of disruption, to be honest. We had wildly different expectations within the organization at the individual level, at the leadership level. We didn't have agile metrics available to us. As you measure me, so I will behave. Well, if you've still got waterfall metrics, that's a good place to say, okay, here's where we start shifting the Overton window as a leader. Like, yeah, I still want my Gantt chart, but I want us to start figuring out how to point things or estimate things and figure out a velocity. And so now we've got this metric that shifts the methodology window up a little bit. And then we add sprint burn down, and we're working in sprints now, by the way. And so these little nudges, if you have the patience and the vision, are how you end up moving the Overton window as a leader. Even though you're not in charge of it, you have to slowly shift your organization's opinion of agile from impossible or stupid to interesting to exciting. And that's when the Overton window is actually there. It's very much a collective effort, but with a very important role for leadership.
I'd say the first mistake that organization made was just trying to make a change like that so abrupt so quickly, change from one methodology to the next.
Yeah. And I've also seen leaders let themselves be beholden to the Overton window to the point where it never really gets moved, right? The opposite approach where, hey, we want to be agile someday. And don't worry, it's not going to be today or tomorrow. Here, we're going to have a daily stand-up, or we're going to work in sprints, or we're going to point things. And those things by themselves don't have a lot of value. They're valuable as part of a system, right? And so when we continually do these procedures that have no intrinsic value that we can see at the team level, that doesn't even nudge the Overton window. In fact, it might even slide it back down farther towards waterfall, because that stuff's stupid. So, we didn't see the value in it because we weren't also introduced to how the daily stand-up, the sprints, and the points lead to a velocity that helps us have a more sustainable pace of work. And we're not working on the weekends as much, and we're still meeting expectations. So, and that includes dealing with your stakeholders and their expectations, right? And hey, we've never told you no before. We're going to start we're not going to tell you no, but we might tell you later, right? And so all those little pieces have to be happening to move that window in that case.
Related to that, you said something that is interesting to me, and it has to do with how, to what extent is the range of acceptable things different to different groups within an organization?
Hmm.
So the range of things which are acceptable to, for instance, the boardroom might be
Mhm.
quite different than the individual contributors at the level of and being able to kind of decompose that a little bit, see what those are at, and think about those as slightly separated from each other, but that they need to move, uh,
Yeah.
they need to move in some sort of coordinated way.
Yeah. This is going to sound Machiavellian, but I like to find those groups that are thinking more the way I want them to think
Absolutely.
and find ways to make them more influential, right? Culturally, not in terms of, who's more powerful or anything like that, but just culturally influential. Isn't
Right.
this interesting, this thing they're talking about? And just attention alone to the human animal. I mean, once you have somebody's attention on on the thing you want them to be paying attention to, you're halfway there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, I agree. So Marcus, you mentioned some things that might be considered a blind spot or obstacles when trying to shift public or organizational perception within the Overton window. Can you expand a little bit on those and what those might actually look like?
Working with the Overton window inside an organization that you are a part of requires a lot of self-knowledge, self-awareness, right? You need to be able to actually look clearly at what are the acceptable things, not what you want them to be, but what are they really, right? And being able to do that in a culture in which you are embedded is actually really very hard. And one of the reasons why bringing in a consulting group can help with this is that perspective. It's not actually that hard if you're outside an organization to look at what's going on there and begin to spot what those trends are and what those value systems are that define what this Overton window is. So that's like the first thing is just seeing what's going on today. That can be an enormously difficult thing for an organization to do. And then the next thing is it's very, very tempting to jump ahead to the end state. And the sense that all I have to do is kind of explain this well and everything will change, right? And I'm sorry, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And so you have to have a strategy. You have to understand what your current state is in terms of where the window's at. You have to understand what pieces that would need to change. And then you need to figure out what's the pathway in there. And if you try to change many, many things simultaneously, if you try to go, well, just many things all at the same time, it can be almost impossible to tell where you're at or what you're doing. And you just kind of create some uncertainty that might eventually roll over into actual chaos in your organization because people can't tell what in the world is going on. What's the right thing to do now? So those are some of the things that come up.
And building on that, on a kind of a lower level, when you start off trying to shift what is acceptable, what's interesting, what's impossible, what's absolutely necessary, you start off afraid you're going to come on too strong, basically, and somebody's going to say, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to think. Don't tell me what my opinion is. And I personally carry that fear with me sometimes too far, to where we get to the point with an organization where we're way in approaching the finish line on a cloud transformation or an agile transformation. And I'm still soft gloving it so much that people start getting frustrated and say, it went from impossible to interesting to exciting, and I missed it. I'm still thinking people are resistant to this, right? And they finally, do some form of just tell me what to do. I'm in. Come on. So yeah, like Jim said, you have to really pay attention to what your assumptions are
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
you're doing this too.
And organization of any size is not homogenous, right?
Right.
You have different things that are going on inside that organization. So if you tried to okay, I'm going to get it on the whiteboard, I'm going to draw, this is where our Overton window is, chances are pretty good that that's probably going to be wrong, right? One of the big blind spots that I've seen is people assuming that what I think is what everyone thinks.
Hmm.
And that's, man, that's almost always a mistake, in whatever role you're talking about, right?
Hey, it's a mistake here at home. I mean,
You bet.
certainly
Yeah,
at work.
I speak of these blind spots from personal experience. Every one of them.
Marcus, you mentioned a little bit also about the importance of moving from acceptance to curiosity to excitement. What patterns or stories help drive that evolution, especially when forming a shared identity or purpose? Because when I think about that, I think about maybe internal influencers, people who are driving that change and how important their role in that drive is. And sometimes, I mean, they realize it obviously because they're believers in the change, but the people around them, those are the ones that have to believe and also adapt to that change.
Yeah, I think we've spoken in earlier podcasts about Daniel Pink's work around autonomy, mastery, and shared purpose. And if you dive deeper down that rabbit hole of shared purpose, at the heart of it is a shared identity. You have to have a shared identity before you have a shared purpose. Our shared identity comes from, I think most strongly, it can be characterized as a narrative. Who are we versus not us? And what are we trying to do that's a challenge, right? It's a classic Joseph Campbell, probably fits in somewhere into one of his books, right? So a narrative about who we are is the foundation of why we're making this change. We're increasing our alignment with our shared identity and shared purpose by shifting. We've been overlooking something, right? Or we've been leaving something on the table. And what can we do to start being better in the context of our narrative, where we're trying to get to? That's a lot easier in politics or at home than it is at work sometimes. I understand that. You have to be honest about your story. If you work in a coat hanger factory, what's your shared purpose beyond making enough money for food and shelter? It's kind of hard to say, but it's one of the nice things about information technology is I can't think of a single IT org that I've worked with that didn't have the potential to revolutionize their company or to make an app or a product that didn't revolutionize end users' lives. So that's part of our story. That's part of the plot of our narrative, right? So couching these little nudges that come from leadership in the context of our shared identity and our shared narrative is way more effective than we should do this because, or I have this opinion of this potential change because it'll increase our net profits. That's not super interesting, right? I think we should do this because we are on the cusp of helping the business understand we're not a cost center. We're a profit center. We drive innovation and make more money while we're also saving money for the business. And this is one of these little changes we can make to help them understand that even better. Then now you've got people's interest, right? As opposed to the company's bottom line. It's pretty abstract.
I'm just going to remind everyone that we organize our views of the world in narrative form. That's how we do it. How do we make meaning out of a set of detached different events that happen? We make meaning by making a story about them and telling ourselves a story about them. And so this is a very, very powerful tool, and it's very fundamental to the human nature. Figuring out how to do this is, I think, a really important piece to this Overton window shifting model.
Yeah. Yeah. And to build on that, guess what has lots of stories about it? Whatever's right in the middle of the Overton window right now. There's a lot of stories about how that's good and how the stuff above it and below it are bad. So we absolutely need new stories to shift that. Nothing's going to happen without them.
That's right.
All right. So before we go, beyond achieving that initial goal that sparked the push to shift the window, what long-term strategic advantages can an organization gain by tracking baseline changes and making data-driven decisions?
Part of the story that we're going to be telling about this change ideally has some benefits that we can show, not just feel. Feeling better is great, but being able to show we are better makes a much more powerful narrative and can help to open up the organization to these improvements in general, right? If you've got a fairly sclerotic kind of calcified culture, any change is kind of big news. And then after a while, little changes don't really make the headlines inside your organization anymore. So that's a long-term benefit. But one of the ways we get there is measure your baseline first, right? Jim and I have worked together on a lot of different things that revolve around data-driven decisions. So if we're going to make this change, if we're moving the Overton window so that we can get this new technology in and adopted and get the full benefit of it, what are our numbers like now in terms of throughput, in terms of, bugs in production, in terms of cycle time, in terms of business satisfaction, right? So there's a lot of sentiment analysis that's important too. Sentiment analysis is underrated. It has that word right in the beginning, sentiment. Oh boy, we got work to do. We got money to make. I don't want to talk about sentiment, right? But when you have a good data set from your organization about what's working and what's not working, how they feel about certain aspects of the business, their roles, their teams, etc., establish that baseline. And then when you remeasure, you see if you're going in the right direction or not. And that's not just feelings. That's your organization's health that we're talking about.
Yeah. I was going to mention, because that is one of the metrics that most retailers use to see if people are willing to come back to buy things at their stores. And so that sentiment score is, while it may be, yes, it may be, as you were saying, Marcus, so jokingly, we don't want to hear about feelings and things like that. But that's what drives the business. A good interaction, say, at a technology store that has maybe a salesperson that you interact with, a good interaction with that person might drive you back into that store. Yeah. Because you had a good interaction with that person. And then when you get that sentiment survey, you say, hey, I had a great time with Marcus because he was very, diligent. He made sure I got everything I needed for the computer that I bought, etc. I'm ready to come back whenever I need to.
Yeah. Well, and if you extrapolate that out to an organizational health perspective, if 90% of the people feel like they're only measured by subjective metrics, that's more than a feeling, right? Yeah. That actually means that management is probably focused too much on their own feelings, as opposed to.
And those feelings management have, if they're not in a day-to-day position where they're dealing with the public or with the direct customers, like, I'll tell you how I feel. I feel like we need to make some money.
Right. Yep.
And
more
that's
hangers.
Not.
Yeah. More hangers. Yeah.
I mean, Jim and I have made these the foundation of lots of ongoing work at clients where, hey, your individual developers, the vast majority of them don't feel like we have a single source of truth architecture. Well, you can talk to your blue in the face and show all the licenses you paid for and all that stuff. But you now have data that says there is an issue happening with that. And that's something that we can, and we bring it back to the Overton window. Hey, 70% of our developers feel like there's not a single source of truth in our architecture. 40% of our DBAs feel like they do more time on documentation than on the command line. So, or in their IDE or whatever. Let's get an integrated platform and stop using spreadsheets for everything. Hey, like, that's the beginning of a story, right? And we're not going to just come in and slam the Overton window up or down. We're prepping it, and then we continue with our shared identity. Like, we're the smart ones. We're the efficient ones. We're better than the competition. And this is going to help us continue that, right? So that we can feel good and proud of our work and work better together and feel less frustrated, and those little ripples. And so by the time that little ripple effect gets out through the rest of the organization, instead of people saying, I'm never going to use anything except my Excel spreadsheet, they've already kind of accepted, right? They're
Right.
already at least accepting, if not interested. So yeah, the sentiment analysis, and that's one part of the data-driven decision making, that mechanisms, that understanding the Overton window and how we can, to some extent, control it, understand where we cannot control it. That helps us understand why things are working or not working to support our data-driven decisions.
And data, just to put those two themes together, narrative and data, you can make a statement like, I don't like the number of, I don't know, of software errors that we've seen in the last month. Or you can say, our software errors have gone up from 1% to 5% of commits. Okay, you feel the power of the second one is much greater than the power of the first one, right? So you can say, we got to get back down to 1%. So not only have you communicated an actual fact, you've also beginning to communicate a goal. You're beginning to communicate how are we going to attack this? We know how to attack this, guys. What are we going to do? Right.
Yeah.
So all of those things work together, understanding where your Overton window is, understanding what your metrics are, being able to generate a narrative around it.
Yeah. And if you start off with that and get people talking about that, and we figure out, oh, it's because we're still using SVN and we're not using Git or anything like that, then people start going from, we only use SVN forever, like they've got the bumper sticker on the car, to kind of the Overton window starts moving right then, almost imperceptibly, but right at that moment. So instead of coming in and decreeing, everybody's using a Git model from now on, somebody's going to come to you as a leader and go, should we start using Git? Right. I was talking with some people, and that might be something we should look at. Fantastic. So sometimes we do it unconsciously, right? We move the Overton window unconsciously, but just being aware of it and what's happening can help it be way more effective.
All right. And with that, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you with us on Ask Anything to talk about the Overton window. Let's do this again, shall we? Because this is great. Thank you so much again, Jim McKean and Marcus Reed.
Thank you. Looking forward to next time.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening in to this week's edition of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to Jim McKean and Marcus Reed talk to us about the Overton window. Be sure to join us next time as we continue to dive deeper with our resident experts and what they're currently working on. Don't forget to share your ideas or topics with us through social media. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get your podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.